If you enjoy our videos and podcasts and would like us to continue putting out regular quality content, head over to patreon.com/aircrewinterview, where you can donate monthly, and in return you will get rewards ranging from early interview viewings, bonus clips, credited as a producer, and much more. Thank you and enjoy.
There was an element of, on the Wessex, I used to get loads of hands-on flying.
Yeah.
It was brilliant, and I was doing everything with the helicopter, hovering, taking on fuel, taking troops into confined areas, all sorts of things. I was doing that with the Wessex. It was such a nice aeroplane to fly. Merlin is a little bit more testing. Actually, you're going up from 90 knots to 150. Now that might not seem a lot, but that's a big difference.
Yeah.
And it's a very slippy aeroplane.
Is it really?
And the Wessex had a tail wheel, so you could just chuck it on the ground, slam the tail wheel in, bonk. And if you look at the undercarriage on a Wessex, it's tractor undercarriage. It takes a lot of stuff. This is a bit more delicate.
Yeah.
But also, if you try to slow this thing down, and you're flaring it, the tail rotor is 72 foot behind you or 70 foot behind you. So if you're getting close to the ground and you start pulling the nose up to lose some speed, you run the risk of sticking the rotor into the ground. So it took a little bit more thought on how you're going to slow it down. Charge in there, but slowing it down was a little bit more difficult. You could do it because, of course, any helicopter, you put it on its side and it's like hitting a brick wall. So you could do it, but you just had to be a bit more careful with the tail rotor where it was. Yeah. At the back. So left-hand seat. So I used to get checked annually for my to see how capable I was of landing it, because we're on operations. So if if something happens to the right-hand seat and they get shot for any, if it all goes horribly wrong and they get shot, it's a bit crazy if I'm sat there in the left-hand seat with 24 troops in the back going, does anybody know how to land this thing?
Oh, what's happening?
So I used to get checked out on that, and I used to get hands-on, so I could fly, and I had some fabulous flying on that aeroplane. I always had to think about it a little bit harder than I don't know. You put a Wessex on, but that aeroplane is kind of a little bit more. You're very aware of it sort of all the time. But it's very fast. It had amazing radios on it. It had a brilliant nav system. It had a state-of-the-art defensive aid systems. It had lasers.
Lasers?
Yeah, no sharks involved, but it had lasers. So for infrared countermeasures.
Right.
And when I first started with the Merlin and we were looking at the defensive aid systems, it had something called directional infrared countermeasures, DIRCM, which is old school jammers just put a jamming signal out around in a sort of all over the place, apart from it was blanked probably by the fuselage, which is very inefficient because you're putting all of this energy out around the sky and the missile's only small and it's coming from one direction, but you're still having to jam over there. Now the advantage is you don't know which direction the missile's coming from, so you're jamming the whole sky where you can. So it doesn't matter which direction the missile's coming from, you're able to sort of reach into its head. With a directional one, you're focusing that energy, all of that energy is now focused into a narrow beam which you point at the missile. So now you've got to know where the missile is coming from. Disadvantage of that is to know where the missile's coming from, it's already got to be coming at you.
Yeah, so it's already heading your way.
Yeah. So it's but the old school, the DIRCM thing that we had was basically one of those old jammers, but it was focused. They were talking then way in the future. In the future, it's going to be lasers. We're going to have lasers, and that will be so much more efficient, and it'll knock missiles dead, or at least their guidance systems and things. That came in within a couple of years. It was on the horizon, but because of the pace of Iraq, and because when there's things like that, when the threat's there, and you've got the focus, you've got the reason for making sure that this happens. That came in way quicker than it was expected to, and then we had lasers on two of them, one each side.
Right. Yeah, so it's like really quickly, yeah.
And it's Star Wars stuff. If you imagine a manpads isn't a big missile, especially when it's coming towards you, and so the system has to detect that, slew a camera at it, which is then looking in that. So it's looking in UV to detect the missile, sees where it's coming from, slews an infrared camera, which locks onto the missile, a little tracking gate, confirms that, yeah, there's something here with UV and IR, so it's getting a double sort of thing. And then fires the laser. Now, actually, the laser's already firing when it comes out. So straight away, as soon as you lock onto that missile, it's getting laser in its head. And can you imagine doing Mk3 towards something and somebody points a laser in your head?
Exactly, yeah.
It's going to hurt you, isn't it? It's going to hurt your eyes. Your eyes are going to go all fuzzy. If your eyes are going to go fuzzy, you're not going to be able to see what you're tracking. So therefore, you know, it's not going to work. And it proved it was worth its salt in Iraq a couple of times. I've got gin and wine. The interesting thing about this is they're both from the same stable.
Yeah.
These are both from Chapeldown. So it's a Chapeldown gin, which was, when you asked me the question to start with and I couldn't remember, it suddenly came to me.
Now you got it, yeah.
Chapeldown. And it's also their wine, English wines. Yum. You should try it.
Well, I'll try it, like maybe a glass in a bit. We'll see what happens. But yeah, so Caroline, let's talk about the Merlin. What was it like to fly?
For me as a navigator, it was brilliant because the whole reason for being there as a navigator, obviously, is mission management. That's your role. So you're not just mission managing your aeroplane, but the whole task probably, and multiple aircraft formations and things like that. The Merlin made that so much easier because of the extras it had on board. So the Wessex predated GPS and things like that. So Wessex really was looking out the window with a map, a compass and a stopwatch and doing your navigation that way, whereas Merlin came in with it had a GPS embedded inertial, but also a little bit later we got digital map, so that made it easier because you got a big picture of the world in front of you. So you could overlay all sorts of things on there. So you could overlay restricted airspace and things like that. So you had a god's eye view of where you were in space at any particular time, what was around you, as opposed to looking at the map and going, I think we're here and I think we should be going over there. So Merlin helped that way, but also the radios. So you could speak to, we had too many radios actually. It gets to a point where you've got too many radios because you can only really follow one conversation properly, but you've got multiple conversations going on. So you've got 2 secure radios. So you might be talking secure air to air, plus you're talking secure radios to air to ground. You've got air traffic radios. You've got the airspace management radios. And also you're talking ahead to the next user. So you're not just talking about where you are now, you're planning ahead. That's all part of the mission management thing. Sort of saying, right, we're going here. I need to speak to them now before we leave here so that they're ready for us when we get there. And there's multiple radios. Advantage of the Merlin was it had 4 crew. So the driver did the driving. That's what they're paid to do.
Yeah.
But the crewmen, we had 2 crewmen, and the front end of the cabin, the crewmen had access to the comms panel, had access to navigation information and things like that. So they could contribute to that, and they could take radios. They could take some radios off you. And so it was all about the crew management, and helicopters were really good at that, managing the crew, and everybody on that airplane, all 4 people, are flying, operating and fighting that airplane, which is different to the way a lot of other nations do things. So that could reduce a lot of the workload in the cockpit because on ops it was pretty frenetic, really, lots going on. Merlin also had we had two variants of Merlin. We had the Mark III and we had the Mark IIIA. The Mark IIIA came in as a consequence of there not being enough helicopters in Afghanistan, and that made the news. So then the knee-jerk reaction was to buy more helicopters.
Yeah.
The Danish had ordered 6 Merlins, so we stole them.
Yeah.
We didn't steal them. We kind of negotiated a deal where instead of those Merlins going to Denmark, they came to UK. But they were specified completely differently to the Merlins we already had. They were designed for predominantly search and rescue, but also with special forces stroke trooping requirements as a secondary role. Mm-hmm. So the aircraft didn't fit in with us, with the Merlins we already had. But they had laser optical wire warning system, so flying at low level, they would detect wires at a certain diameter. It had a weather radar, it had a TCAS, it had the ability to send pretty much text messages from one platform to another. It had all of these amazing things on it which we didn't have on the standard Merlin.
Yeah.
But because we didn't have them on the standard Merlin, they were determined to be unsupported. So as they broke, they were never replaced or never repaired or never supported. So we had all this extra capability in the aircraft, but we were never able to use it. Problem was that the aircraft wasn't fit for Afghanistan because of the radios, but also because the back end of the airplane, the cabin, wasn't geared up for heavy duty troop moves and things like that. There's all sorts of reasons why that platform didn't go to Afghanistan. So 2 different variants, and what I would like to have seen is a combination of the 2, the Merlin Mark III, but with all of those extra bits and pieces, especially TCAS. TCAS came traffic collision avoidance system, so it gave you a heads up of other aircraft in close proximity, and especially at night, working on NVGs, lights out, a very dark space, nobody's talking to each other, potentially, especially on operations. The TCAS would be very, very useful, and I got scared far too many times in near misses in helicopters, where TCAS would have been a help. So it had extra bits on it, which was really good. But the Merlin platform itself, we had 3 GPMGs on it, so 1 each side, machine guns, 1 each side, 7.62, just behind the cockpit, and 1 on the ramp. And we use those for self-protection, self-defense, really, rather than, it wasn't an offensive platform. It was just to give covering fire for picking up troops, dropping off troops, or in some kind of protective orbit, being able to reach down and do things. Not reach down very far, but it doesn't matter how high you are, bullets have got to reach the ground somehow, haven't they? We would carry 24 troops. The problem with Merlin was Merlin came in post health and safety. So health and safety at war. So everything was safe, which was brilliant actually, because you want to be safe. It doesn't matter if you're going into war as soldiers. If the airplane has a hard landing, crash, rollover, you want to be able to get out and fight. You don't want to be trapped inside this aircraft. And Merlin was designed to be more survivable. So it had independent stroking crash-worthy seats rather than bench seats that you would find in other aircraft. Hercules, like Chinook, like Puma. But then you've got a compromise, because then to have full crash-worthy protection, you've got to have a 4-point harness. And soldiers don't like 4-point harnesses, because you're trying to put a harness on in the dark, and it's like clipping in things all over the place, and they're wearing burr guns, and they're wearing all this extra kit and carrying weapons and things. So it's a compromise, which you have to deal with. But if you're going to crash and roll over, and get up and sort of escape the aircraft, then Merlin was designed to do that, which was something I never had to practice or try.
Thank God.
Thankfully. Some did, but I didn't. For me, it was all about the tactical aspects of the aircraft and the defensive aid systems. And defensive aid systems were streets ahead of most platforms. So it was very well protected in terms of infrared. It was very well protected on paper against radar platforms as well, but never tested really, because the focus was on Iraq, Afghanistan, and that was a different war. So we never really got involved in the nitty-gritty of the radar warning systems and defensive aids. It had laser warners on it, a bit like the Apache. And I really enjoyed operating it. It was quite often really hard work because the more kit you have on there to help you do the job, the more things you got to monitor, the more things you got to work with, and the workload goes up a little bit. Sometimes it's just nice to look out a window with a stopwatch and a compass and just get on and do things.
Absolutely.
Interestingly, the way the Air Force does things now, it's gone away from paper maps, which I think is wrong. So there's a reliance on digital now, so digital planning systems, and you don't need to carry paper maps into the cockpit, which is interesting for a military perspective, because you've always got denial of digital systems, and you've got denial of GPS and all that kind of stuff. So actually it might come down to the day where you need to look out the window, use a map and a stopwatch and a compass. But there you go, that's the digital age. So when my book came out, I got invited to go on television. So I ended up doing Good Morning Britain with Piers and Susanna, mostly because there was a choice between doing Breakfast, BBC, or Good Morning Britain, ITV, but mostly because I had a really good friend, Mikey K, who used to be my boss, and he
was a helicopter pilot as well.
Yeah, he was a Puma pilot by background, but when I was on the operational evaluation unit, he came in as my boss. So the way it worked was that the flight commander for Chinook looked after Sea King, so Chinook and Sea King, search and rescue Sea King, and then the flight commander, there's one flight commander who looked after Merlin and Puma, and he was a Puma guy, so he looked after us, which was brilliant. It's really nice. I love Mikey, but it's really nice having the boss as an expert on the opposite platform, because you can get away with a little bit more, because he's not as familiar with your airplane type, so he's all over the Puma because that's what he flies. But sometimes you could go into him with Merlin problems and sort of have that little bit of an advantage because you knew more about it. So, but he was a lovely guy, huge respect, and he guests on Good Morning Britain to do sort of little talks about the security aspects or aviation aspects and things. And so we joined up to go on Good Morning Britain, and it was Piers and Susanna. And I was scared stiff because Piers has got this reputation, but I trusted Mikey, and I thought it would be a far better interview having Mikey next to me, because if I'm on the sofa and I'm talking about my journey within the military as a transgender woman, then those people who don't understand or wouldn't necessarily believe me, because they would make an assumption that I would be saying that naturally because I'm defending myself. But to have somebody there who worked alongside me, who has none of that as part of their own being, to be able to turn around and say, no, this is actually what happened. If I say this is what happened, then there's going to be an element of some people going, yeah, you would say that. Mikey say, no, this is what happened, then that's a different ballgame. So for him to say Kaz was really respected and she did a great job as a tactics instructor, if I said that, it kind of sounded like I'm bigging myself up. But for somebody else to say that makes a big difference. And that's the thing, that the message we wanted to get across, because there's this perception amongst some people that because you're transgender, you're useless and not going to be worthwhile being in the military and your liability. But actually, I was just a person, and I was doing my job, and I was doing my job well. So he was able to turn around and say, yeah, and she was on my my flight, and she did an amazing job. I won awards for excellent service, so I must have been doing something right. But so that was kind of quite scary to go into, but I had that backup with Mikey there, and actually the interview I thought went really, really well. And it led on to other things. So that was 2017, that was 2017 March. Since then, I added it up recently. I've done about 35 different radio and television interviews. The most recent one was a couple of weeks ago here with BBC Radio Lincolnshire with lovely Melvin. So it goes on. But the thing about the radio is I get, once you go on radio as a military person talking about some things, then your name goes in the book as a military expert. So I get calls to talk about some amazing strange things, which I've got no experience of whatsoever. And I go, as much as I'd like to come on radio and talk about this, you better ask somebody else who knows what they're talking about, because I've never done this before, whatever it is. I get asked to talk about army recruiting, for instance. Why are you asking me about army recruiting? I'm Air Force.
Wow.
You know, being LGBT, being transgender, being LGBT, whatever, it's just a person. You're just a person trying to get by in life, like we're all trying to get by in life. You just want to do, live life to the best you can, be loved by people, love people, have a job, go to work. That's all you want to do. So what's wrong with that? Why do people feel obliged to say nasty things about you? And I don't understand that idea. Yeah. So everybody just wants to get by in life and do what it is they're doing, and it's difficult because being LGBT, you're exposing, if you're openly LGBT, so like going on radio and TV and doing talks like I do, then you're opening up yourself to judgment and comments from other people. And I think the majority of people, there's three sort of breakout groups, if you like, I guess. There's that's the wrong word, but what I'm trying to get at is there are people who are hostilely negative, whatever it is, and it doesn't matter whether you're LGBT or whether it's race or whether it's your social background or whatever. It doesn't matter. There are nasty people out there, and they'll just have a go at anybody. There's those people. There's people who are really supportive and, hey, do you know what? Just crack on with your life. If you're enjoying your life, then crack on with it. And then in the middle, there's this big chunk of people who are undecided. They don't know. And they can be influenced either way, positively or negatively, by who they hear, who they listen to. And so if they hear negative things from somebody who's spouting all this horrible ideas of what it means to be, in my case, say transgender, and they don't know any better, then they're going to likely believe that. So that's why I do my talks. So I go out to all these places and talk just to say, do you know what, I'm not trying to tell you that you have to like me because I'm transgender. I'm just saying, hey, this is me. I just want to get by. I want to do my job. I don't like the idea that I go out there and say I'm a transgender person who was in the military and flew fast jets and helicopters. It's the other way around. I was a person who went and did fast jets and helicopters. Oh, and by the way, I just happened to be transgender. I was a person first. And on top of that, there's a challenge that I've had to meet in life. And it's been a really, really hard challenge. So I don't need people adding to that challenge, really. So it's all I would say to people listening in who are going through those challenges, whatever they may be, is believe in yourself, but make good use of the support that's around you, your friends, people who think positively. Do away with the negative people, because you don't need those in life at all. But embrace the positive people and believe in yourself and just be you.
And you obviously talked about it there, but like, how do you personally cope with, the hate or anything like that you see on social media and stuff like that? How do you cope?
It used to upset me, but now I use it more as an awareness of what's still out there, because one of the problems I see is even people who are looking outwardly positively are influenced by this idea that LGBT people are always going on about this.
Yeah.
Why do you need to do it? Because people are accepting of LGBT people. So why do you need to have prides? Why do you need to be doing this? Why do you need to be doing that? Why do you need to be saying that? And actually it's because those people who aren't part of that community don't see what it's really, really, really like. And they're making judgments and assessments and things based on what they see, not what they're experiencing as part of that community. So they don't really get the right to turn around and say, why are you going on about this? You don't need to do this anymore. The people who are being influenced by what's going on in society have that right to turn around and say, but this is happening still. Take the military, for instance. There was a post on, this is LGBT History Month, so there was a post on the RAF Facebook page saying, look how positive we are about LGBT, we've come a long way in 20 years. And there was some really lovely comments, there was some very supportive comments, but there was also an awful lot of really nasty comments. Why? I don't know, but they were there. But even people who were supportive were turning around to say, yeah, why are we actually still going on about this 20 years later? And the answer is because businesses these days have to be very, very, very competitive. They have to be competitive. And if you've got big businesses putting messages out there saying we're LGBT inclusive, and the Air Force and the Army and the Navy aren't seen alongside those, then people are going to assume that they're not. They will, they just assume that they're not. But we're not talking about LGBT people here, we're talking about everybody, because the younger generation gets inclusion and acceptance, and they don't want to go to work for an organisation which isn't inclusive of diverse communities. So they will judge an employer on how it treats its people. And it doesn't matter whether you're a minority for whatever reason. If that employer isn't treating people fairly, then they will look on that business as something that they don't want to go and do. So it's not, it's not looking towards LGBT people. But taking all of that aside, the Air Force is a hugely respected organisation around the world. It's got an awful lot of respect around the world. And if we allowed ourselves to look internally within the UK and say, but we're all sorted here, why do you need to be saying that we're LGBT plus inclusive? If you think the reach that the military has into countries where it's still illegal to be LGBT, where it's hostile.
It's crazy when you think about it.
Some countries still have death penalties for being LGBT.
It's mental.
What is the best way to affect change in all of those places, in different nations? What is the best way to affect change? It's by positive example and showing the world, hey, actually, we do LGBT and it's not an issue, it's not a problem. We're just employing the best people. It doesn't matter. We don't care about things, sort of diversity issues. We think we want a diverse team because actually diverse teams are proven to work better. So you're influencing other countries, and that saves lives. That saves lives, and it affects change globally, not just within the UK. So it's still worthwhile having prides. It's still worthwhile having messages on Facebook and Twitter and any kind of social media platform to say, look how inclusive we are. Because we're not just talking about England or the UK or Europe, we're talking about the world. Really, that message gets across the world. So it's always worth doing. We're all here for a finite time. We're all working to do our best in that time. Why can't we just get on and do things together? And if you can't do things together, if you have an opinion which is sort of in opposition, it's an opinion, and you're absolutely totally entitled to your opinion. But that doesn't give you the right to.
But it doesn't make it right.
Well, no, but it doesn't give you the right to go and enforce it on somebody else.
Yeah.
So yes, by all means, have your opinion. But in regard to opinions, learn before you judge people. Learn about what it is.
Yeah.
So you know, don't just charge in there and go, this is wrong and you're horrible and
So like I'm right, you're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you feel that way? Have you spoken to somebody who's in the opposite shoes and learn a little bit about actually what it is they're all about?
But Caroline, thank you very much for like hosting us. I want to thank you very much, and hopefully we can cheers.
Right, I've got 2 glasses.
We've got
here,
2.
So I'm going to get cheers.
Thank you very much, Caroline.
And my wine. Thank you very much.